join me. The reading today is out of Mark chapter 12, verses 13 through 34. So Mark 12, 13 through 34. Of course, I got a frog in my throat just as I walked up here. And they sent unto him certain of the Pharisees and of the Herodians to catch him in his words. And when they were come, they said unto him, Master, we know that thou art true, and carest for no man, for thou regardest not the person of men, but teachest the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? Shall we give, or shall we not give? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said unto them, Why tempt ye me? Bring me a penny, that I may see it. And they brought it. And he said unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. And Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. Then come unto him the Sadducees, which say there is no resurrection, and they asked him, saying, Master, Moses wrote unto us, if a man's brother die, and leave his wife behind him, and leave no children, that his brother should take his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were seven brethren, and the first took a wife, and died, dying left no seed. The second took her, and died, neither left he any seed. And the third likewise. And the seven had her, and left no seed. Last of all the women died also. In the resurrection, therefore, when they shall rise, whose wife shall she be of them? For the seven had her to wife. And Jesus answering said unto them, Do ye not therefore err, because you do not know the Scripture, neither the power of God? For when they shall rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels which are in heaven. And as touching the dead that they rise, have ye not read in the book of Moses, how in the bush God spoke unto him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. Ye therefore do greatly err. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he answered them well, asked him, Which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, First of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said unto him, Well, Master, thou hast said the truth. For there is one God, and then there is none other but he. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, with all the soul, with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself, is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered discreetly, he said unto him, Thou art not far from the kingdom of God. And no man after that durst ask him any question.
Good morning, everyone. I invite you to join me in Mark chapter 12. As we continue to enjoy this marvelous gospel of Jesus Christ according to Mark. Gospels are truly special. While they contain history, they are not histories in the truest sense of the word. These episodes from Jesus' life are not chosen to be some type of comprehensive historical biography of the person of Jesus Christ. In fact, that would be almost impossible according to John. The books of the world could not contain all that he did. Instead, these episodes are chosen carefully under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that you might believe and know the way to salvation, the way through the person of Jesus Christ. And we've arrived in a section of this gospel in which we've been treated to one of Mark's bookends. He does this so that you will not think that these are a group of randomly chosen episodes from Jesus' life. I know I'm certainly guilty sometimes of reading these episodes kind of like it's when you're changing the channel on your television, you keep hitting and then you go to another one and then you go to another one and then you watch that little 10 minutes of that and then you go to this. Or maybe the better example would be YouTube videos, right? That's not what this is. These are carefully knit together. And they're carefully knit together in a bookend and then maybe a postscript. The bookend actually starts in chapter 11 with the story of the fig tree. Chapter 11, verse 12. Where Jesus comes to this fig tree, it's producing no edible fruit, not even the small pagum polyps that are edible in the spring of each year. And so he curses it because it produces no fruit to feed him. Then Mark hits the pause button and immediately tells us about Jesus entering the temple and knocking over the tables of the money changers and driving them out and blocking the sale of sacrifices. Then he returns to the fig tree. Verse 20, and as they were passing by in the morning, they saw that the fig tree withered from the roots up. Why would Mark do that? Because he wants you to realize, as you read this, that these are not disconnected. It's really a one-to-one correlation. The temple is producing no fruit. It will be cursed and closed. The fig tree is producing no fruit. It also cursed and closed. And together we take the fig tree and we realize he's really talking about the temple. And then we hit chapter 12 and we're going to hit chapter 13. And then at the end of chapter 13, a little, what I call a bookend epilogue, maybe a bookend postscript. Where in chapter 13, verse 28, Jesus goes back to the fig tree. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. So he's tying all this together and hanging out in Bethpage, which, means the house of the unripe fig. And so we're in a section where we're getting a pretty sad tale that the temple is no longer fit for purpose. And it comes, of course, in the midst of this ongoing teaching of the disciples. And if you picked up your notes, let's do a quick review of this so that we will understand more fully what we're about to study with the next couple of conflict episodes as case studies. The disciples are growing, but what still hampers their learning? Well, three things are hampering their learning. Number one, they're having to learn total dependence upon Christ. Total dependence upon Christ. And as humans, that's not easy, is it? We like to be self-sufficient. We like to be able to be the captains of our own fate, the captain of our own ship. And Jesus is teaching them total dependence upon him in all things. Number two, death to self. That same that desire for self-sufficiency pours over in self-exaltation and the ego, the desire to, again, direct our own ways. Death to self. They're having to learn that. And finally, number three, he's inviting them to count the cost. What will it mean to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? What will that life be like? Count the cost. Now, last week I reminded you the temple really has, and if you go and read throughout the Torah, or the first 5 books of Moses, the only books of Moses actually, you'll see a reminder of the importance of the temple. It is a place of restored relationship with God. What was lost when Adam and Eve sinned? Relationship. They destroyed their relationship with God. In the same way that when you sin against someone else, you destroy relationship with them, it has destroyed the relationship with God. And we saw that it is a place for atonement of sin, constantly. Constant sacrifices being made, daily sacrifices as required by the law and by people who were coming to bring a sacrifice for atonement. Atonement means covering, something to cover their sin. In the same way that God killed 2 animals and knit together clothing to cover the shame of Adam and Eve in the garden, atonement is about covering. I want to hide my sin in a place where God cannot see it. And so that's going on constantly at the temple. daily, weekly, with festivals, annually, such as on the Day of Atonement. But now we find that Jesus is declaring the temple is no longer fit for purpose. Do you remember when he arrived on his triumphant entry? It's such an anticlimactic moment, isn't it? He rides in to cheers and shouts of Hosanna, and they're laying down their coats and they're waving their palm fronds, and he comes right into Jerusalem. He goes right to the temple, because that's his destination. He gets off that donkey, he walks into the temple, he takes a look around, and then he walks out and goes home. He is setting up these conflicts to let us know that the temple is not fit for purpose any longer. And we've already seen a couple of reasons of how it got that way. And I just want to remind you, this is not a theological or sort of a historical, this is not just first and foremost of historical importance. It has a practical importance for you and I. The same mistakes that the people of God are making at the time of Jesus, churches today can make these same mistakes. And the effect will be what we see in Revelation chapter 2, verse 5. Jesus will take away our lampstand. He won't let us shine for him because we are misleading. We are not actually bringing about his glory. And we saw the first two mistakes they made. Conflict number one, God abandons the temple because his authority is rejected. Remember, they said, by what authority do you knock over these tables? By what authority do you drive out the money changers? And Jesus says, well, I'll answer that question if you answer mine. Is John the Baptist's authority from heaven or from men? And they couldn't answer that question because no matter how they answer it, they're going to lose. They've rejected Christ's authority. Listen, could you find churches today where they have slowly and gradually just turned their backs on the authority of Jesus Christ? Of course you can. They call themselves Christians, they call themselves churches, and they care not one whit what Jesus Christ teaches and says. Listen, they need to have their lampstand taken away. The second problem and the second conflict was God abandons the temple because no relationship is sought. Remember the parable? God is represented in this parable as an absentee landowner, and he has gone to a great deal of trouble to build this vineyard. And it takes about 5 years for that vineyard to start producing fruit. And it finally starts produces fruit, and he sends his servant to collect the rent. What do to the servants? Well, they beat them. That would be the prophets of old, right? And they kill them. And then the landowner says, well, surely they'll respect my son. And he sends his son, and they kill him too. Why? Not because they don't know who he is. They kill him because they know exactly who he is. And they kill him because he's the heir. And if you want to usurp the king, you have to kill the king, and you have to kill all of his male heirs. Can you find churches today where there is absolutely no desire to seek a deeper, meaningful, close relationship with God? Well, of course you can. They call themselves a church. They may even read some scripture. But really having a meaningful relationship with God is very low on the scale. And we talked about last week, if we were to take a poll of most Christians, what do you look for in a fellowship before you join? Before you connect with a local group of believers, what do you look for? I imagine what would be at the top of that list would be music, place for friends, a place for a good nursery, a good youth group. I want them to be involved in social issues. I want them to be leading the charge on social change, standing up to injustice. I wonder if a deeper relationship with God and the atonement of sin would even make the list. How many people could you stop and say, hey, if you're looking for a new church, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a place where I can have a deeper relationship with God and where we are all about atonement for sin. I just imagine that might not be on anybody's list. And beloved, that's tragic. Because quite frankly, that's the reason we exist. When people are not clear on the reason we exist, Jesus comes in and knocks over your tables, and he takes away your lampstand. And quite frankly, if projections are right, over the next 10 years, to the tune of 100,000 churches in the United States will close. And maybe a lot of them need to close, because they have long ago rejected Christ's authority. They have not sought any relationship with God, and they care nothing for pursuing righteousness, proclaiming atonement of sin through Jesus Christ's death, and seeking a relationship with God all the time, 24/7, 365. They care nothing for those things. And quite frankly, they should have their lampstand taken away. But the pain doesn't stop there. We still have we still have 5 more conflicts, and each one of them reveals a different weakness in the temple of Jesus' day, and quite frankly, they could be a weakness in any of the churches you and I have ever attended today. They were in Jesus' day, they are in our day. And this is sad because we can see and we know how this ends. We know where Jesus is going with this. That temple veil is going to rip from the ceiling to the floor when he dies, and he's going to build a new temple, and it's going to be in his believers, in his followers. The temple, you are the temple. Well, let's look at conflict number 3. God abandons the temple because no one renders service to God. Let me read again verses 13 through 17. Listen to this marvelous report from Mark. And they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in a statement. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are truthful and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to pay a poll tax to Caesar or not? Shall we pay or shall we not pay?" But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, "Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius to look at." And they brought one. And he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" And they said to him, "Caesar's." And Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were amazed at him. So let's just break down a few things that are going on, and then let's just see what the problem is at least in the lives of these individuals. First thing I want to point out is, who are the interrogators? The interrogators are a couple of unlikely allies: the Pharisees and the Herodians. Now, I want you to see what Mark is doing. We've had a delegation from the Sanhedrin. That was the authority question. And then we have a delegation from the Pharisees. They're kind of looking at that delegation from the Sanhedrin and said, "Yeah, it didn't go very well for you. Let us try." But what's going to happen with Mark and all these little conflicts? He's going to hit every single major group of the religious leaders of Jesus' day. So the Pharisees and the Herodians are getting in on the act. And why are they an unlikely political allies? Well, the Pharisees don't have any respect for Rome, and the Herodians, obviously have a great respect for Caesar. So they're unlikely allies, but they both have different reasons for hating Jesus of Nazareth. They both see him as a threat for different reasons. Now, it's strange that they're in Jerusalem, but maybe it's not. It's Passover. This is the Passover week. And we know from the reports of Jesus' trial that Herod Antipas himself is in Jerusalem. Because as soon as Pilate hears that Jesus is a Nazarene, he says, "Oh, this is out of my jurisdiction. I'm going to send this problem over to Herod," who happened to be in town. It would have been way too long to take him all the way back up to Nazareth or back up into Galilee and then bring him back in the day and a half that's between that and the crucifixion. No, Herod's in town for the Passover, and rightly so. Every major politician is going to show up for something like this, right? Everybody's in town. This is a place to come and, either get some political clout and some political currency or to spend it and leverage and make things happen. So while it is unusual for these two to be together, it is not that strange since it's the week of Passover. Maybe things would be different if the Pharisees were the leaders of the temple. Remember, the Sadducees hold all the authority on the Sanhedrin. They have the majority of seats on the Sanhedrin. Maybe if the Pharisees were in charge, things would be different. Turns out not. They are just as blind, lack any discernment, and they are self-serving. When do they come? Well, it's interesting that Mark, in this section of chapter 12, does not have his usual time elements. And then, immediately, the same day, later that day. He uses all these time elements to knit things together. Here, he's just really pushing it all together in one package of continuous movement to show that this is really an ongoing opposition to Jesus. And we're in the temple. It's all happening in the temple. So what is the purpose of their interrogation? Well, Mark tells us very plainly, to trap him. And they think they're so clever. They think, well, we've got the perfect question. We're going to get him. This is the gotcha question. If he says we have to pay the taxes, the people will turn on him. And if he says that he doesn't have to pay the taxes, Rome will turn on him. This is perfect. Maybe this is kind of a replay of John the Baptist, right? Just get John the Baptist. When he started railing against the sin of Rome's governor, he lost his head. You know what these Pharisees are thinking? If we play this question right, and we get Jesus to say, nope, you don't have to pay, maybe we can just sit back and let Rome take care of everything. Well, they're too clever by half. What is the topic? Well, the topic of their question is taxes. They want to talk about taxes. Jesus does not want to talk about taxes. Let me repeat that. Jesus does not want to talk to them about taxes. He wants to talk about something that's really important. The tax question is minutia trivia. This is like two theologians in the back arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. There's a little bit of this trivia to this. Now, I wouldn't say it's quite that trivial because we do have the commands in our lives to submit to the authorities God has placed over us. So while it's not completely trivial, it's a pretty trivial question in light of why God is about to close down the temple. He said, I'd rather talk about something that actually matters. So what does Jesus want to talk about? He wants to talk about their service to God. That's what he wants to. His response is all about their service to God. He says, you want to talk about our service to Caesar? I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what you're doing to advance your relationship with God. And I want to talk about what you're doing to pursue righteousness and to point the way to the atonement of sin. They're not serving God in any way that matters. They think they're serving God by trying to kill Jesus. So he cleverly asked them for a coin that is used to pay the tax. And it's a special coin. It's a denarius, so it'd be the equivalent of 1 day's wages. It's probably the poll tax. This was the coin that was used to pay the poll tax. So it's kind of a tax that everyone would pay. So it's got this general application, this universal impact on everyone. And you had to use this minted coin of Rome to pay it. And of course, it has the emperor's picture on it, just like we put our leaders' pictures on our currency. I mean, every country does that, right? To show that it's the official currency of the realm. And it has Tiberius' picture on it. And then it has this inscription on it: Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus. Wow, that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? The son of God. So here's a coin. He said, does anybody have a coin that we used to pay the tax? And amazingly enough, the Pharisees have the coin on them in the temple. Listen, that alone just tells you all you need to know about where this is going. It's funny that they carry that with them. It's funny that they have it on them. He says, does anybody happen to have one of those coins? And the Pharisees say, yeah, I have one. Oh, so you're completely in on this, aren't you? You're completely in on the economic system of Rome. You don't have any problem participating in the economic system of Rome. You don't have any problem paying the tax and serving. You must be ready to pay the tax when you have to pay the tax. That seems a little odd. And oh, by the way, it says he's the Son of God. Well, that's curious. Well, you could imagine, wow, what an open door for Jesus to just unleash the righteous indignation of God on a pagan system that exalts the emperor as a god. He says, I don't want to talk about that. That is not what I want to talk about. They bring him the narrative. They answer his questions. It's Tiberius Caesar. What's the inscription? It says he's the Son of God. Jesus says, okay, fine. Why don't you just render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's? But, and here's what he really wants to say, render to God the things of God. You are withholding service from God. You are not pursuing God's agenda. In other words, you're not looking to see where God is stirring the water and coming along beside him and helping God. You're stirring the water over here and then asking God to help. That's a big difference, folks. That is a huge difference. They are not the least bit interested in serving God. They don't care about the things of God. I'm sure there was more than a few who were upset. Listen, this is not a pro-Roman statement. I don't think it's an anti-Roman statement. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find Jesus making an anti-Roman statement anywhere. Even at his trial, when he is standing in front of Pilate, and Pilate, he's not defending himself. And Pilate says, do you not understand the stakes? This isn't traffic court. You're not here before me because you were accused of double parking. I can put you to death. And again, what an open door. Here is Jesus' chance to just unleash on the absolute iniquity of Rome. And you know what? He looks at him and says, I know you have that authority over me, and I know exactly who gave it to you. Man, that's not the answer we like, is it? That is just not an answer that we like. Because the implication is that Jesus is about things a lot more important. And he says, yes, government exists. Government exists because we live in a sin-fallen world. God instituted government and gave them the sword and gave them the right to use the sword, because if he didn't, humanity would become even worse. That's a necessary evil that we have that government institution. It's a necessary evil. The New Testament doesn't treat Rome as inherently evil, doesn't treat Rome as inherently good. It just says, yep, this is the way it is. Because when we ate the fruit, this is what we bought. This is the car we bought. And so he comes, and it's not really an anti-Roman statement. It's certainly not a pro-Roman statement. I think it's wrong to think that 13 through 17 is about taxes. His detractors wanted to talk about taxes. Jesus says, I'd rather talk about your service to the God that we both claim to worship, that we claim to love. So this is the third problem with the temple. You want to know why it's going to be shut down? Because they have no respect for the authority of God. They do not care about having any relationship with God, and they do not care about serving God. How did they get this bad? Because this is the leadership that is defining the temple. And Jesus is about to turn out their light. He's about to shut them down. What do they owe to God? What are they withholding from God? This service. He's politely saying to them, government is not your problem. In fact, the government's not even really your jurisdictional problem. It's certainly not your actual problem. You have no deeper relationship with God, and you are not the least bit interested in the atonement of sin. That is your problem. You know what their kind of the conclusion of all this is? What is the conclusion of all this? They are utterly amazed. Verse 17, what does it say? They were utterly amazed. Why is the temple lifeless and dead? There's no respect for God. There's no seeking of a relationship with God, and there's no rendering of service to God. And you know the irony of ironies about that is they were super busy. Those Pharisees were as busy a bunch as you could be around. They probably, the idea that they weren't in service to God, they said, listen, let me tell you what my week has been like. They are up to here in acts of service. And Jesus politely saying to them, yeah, and none of it matters. He said, if you travel halfway around the world and make another convert, that person is now twice as much a son of hell as you. Not a nice thing to say, is it? They are up to their eyeballs in service. Just none of it that matters. Absolutely none of it that matters. I wish we could say that these three problems were the sole problem with the temple. Sadly, we aren't even beginning to scratch the surface of all the problems with the temple. And quite frankly, not beginning to scratch the surface with all the problems of most churches in America, where they have abandoned Christ's authority. They certainly do not care about serving God. So let's look at problem number 4. Problem number 4. God abandons the temple because no one can discern the Scriptures. No one can discern the Scriptures. Verses 18 through 27. Let me read these to you. And some Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and began questioning him, saying, now let's just walk through this very carefully. So who are now our interrogators? The interrogators are now the Sadducees. The Sadducees. So this is just one more group. So we had the Sanhedrin delegation, then we had the Pharisees, now the Sadducees are going to give it a try. Who are the Sadducees? They haven't been around very long. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, as both religious and political parties, arose about 170 years before Jesus' birth. They are a direct offshoot of what is known as the Maccabean Revolt. It's a time where the horrors of the Seleucid Empire were thrown off for a brief time by Judas Maccabee's leadership as the Jews led a rebellion and temporarily kind of pushed back the influence of the Seleucid Empire. And in that time period, we get the Sadducees and we get the Pharisees. They are a little different from the Pharisees, so here are some major differences. So the Sadducees, as Mark has told us, because he's writing to Christians in Rome who may not know much about the Sadducees, these are Gentile Christians living in Rome, they may not know who this political group is. He says they deny the resurrection. So the first thing you know about the Sadducees is they don't believe in life after death. Your death is annihilation. You simply cease to exist. Now the Pharisees do believe in life after death. The Sadducees do not believe in God's sovereignty. The Sadducees are all about the free will of man. Man has total agency. He has complete total free will. The Pharisees are very big on God's sovereignty. That God is sovereignly ordering events. And that while, yes, men have free will, it's just enough free will to condemn us. We have just enough free will to choose and condemn us. And then there's another big difference. Of course, if you don't believe in life after death, the Sadducees are not going to believe in angels and demons. No angels, no demons. The Pharisees certainly believed in this unseen realm of both angelic and demonic hosts. So why are they so different? Well, this is the biggest difference. Here it is. The Sadducees believed and taught that the only Bible you need and the only Bible that is authoritative is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the books of Moses. That's all they look to for their Bible. Much smaller than the one that you have in your lap. Of course, the Pharisees treated as authoritative what you and I think of as the Old Testament for the most part. Now, why is that going to lead the Sadducees to a really, really bad conclusion? Because it denies the unfolding nature of God's revelation. That while God has given us great foundational truths in the books of Moses, the Bible is like an unfolding flower. And it just gets wider and wider as the bloom opens. And so you're going to miss out on total truth if you do not look at the totality. You can't just get it. You can't just understand it from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, despite the fact that's really important. So what do they want to talk about? So that's the Sadducees. They want to talk about the resurrection. Let's read on. Teacher, Moses wrote us that if a man's brother dies and leaves behind a wife and leaves no child, his brother should take the wife and raise up offspring to his brother. And let's stop right there. They're not making a negative argument that, the books of Moses really don't say a lot about the resurrection. They don't expressly talk about the resurrection. There might be some hints of a life after death, but they don't see a clear indication where here's what they're looking for. They're looking for something like in Leviticus that says, and after you die, your soul will either go to hell for all eternity or heaven for all eternity. Yeah, I'm going in the wrong direction here. Up is down and down is up in the world we live in. Yeah, you get the idea. I'm glad I caught that. There's nothing explicitly in there, so they're not making a negative argument. They're not saying, well, the first 5 books are quiet on this issue, so therefore it's not existing. No, they're making a very positive argument. They're making an argument saying, hey, they quote one of the laws. Levirate marriage. You can find it, probably maybe even your Bible marks it in Deuteronomy. This idea that if a husband dies childless, it is the responsibility of his brothers to raise up offspring for him. Why would they require that? Because of the way laws of inheritance worked and the way the land had been given to tribes. It was critical that this land stay in the family. I know a lot of us kind of get squeamish when we read about first cousins marrying in the Habsburg house or the House of Windsor, and it makes us a little uneasy. Why are they doing that? Because they're trying to keep it all in the family, but they're trying to keep the money in the family. That's what they're doing. Keep the money in the family, especially when you have a queen on the throne like Victoria. Why does she marry her first cousin? To keep everything in the family. So this is designed to keep all the land in the proper hands of the proper tribe in the proper place. And so then they come up with this little story. So they quote this law, this positive quoting of the law. They're not going from a negative. There's no mention of resurrection. They just want to say, okay, how does your resurrection work with this law? Now, this story actually predates this encounter. There's a book that's not in the Bible. It's not authoritative. It's the book of Tobit that has this very same story about a woman who had 7 husbands, 7 brothers, and she did not have a child with any of them. So they're just copying that. They're not even original enough to come up with this on their own. There were 7 brothers, And the first took a wife and died, leaving no offspring. And the second one took her and died, leaving behind no offspring, and the third likewise. And so all 7 left no offspring. Last of all, the woman died also. In the resurrection, now here comes their smart alecky question. Here's the smart aleck question. In the resurrection, when they rise again, which one's wife will she be? For all 7 had her as wife. So what's their topic? The resurrection. What is Jesus' response? You got to love this. You just got to love this. Jesus said to them, "You're wrong." He just says, "Is this not the reason you are mistaken?" By the way, look down at the end of verse 27. You are greatly mistaken. He just says, you are wrong. Okay, why are they wrong? 2 reasons. Number 1, they don't understand Scripture. Verse 24, is this not the reason you are mistaken, that you do not understand the Scriptures? They do not understand the Scriptures. In the temple of God, when they can't handle Scripture well, very bad things happen. And it is a horrible, catastrophic method of interpreting the Bible to not understand that it is a steady, progressive revelation of truth. And they are not doing that. And so they've come to horrible conclusions. They do not understand how important it is to handle the Word of God. And that in Jesus' temple, it is absolutely mandatory that we handle Scripture well. This is one of the reasons he's going to shut this temple down. Because they don't know how to handle the Bible. What is their second mistake? Well, he says it very plainly. Not only do you not understand Scripture, you don't understand the power of God. You do not understand the power of God. Remember when Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac? Isaac is Isaac is the right heir. He is the rightful heir of promise. He's the child of promise. And God is testing Abraham. And does Abraham trust God's power even unto resurrection from the dead? And you know what? Abraham does. Abraham trusts God even to that point. The Sadducees do not. They do not have an understanding of Scripture, and they do not understand the power of God. But they've made an even bigger error. In fact, at the end, when he says you are greatly mistaken, what he really means is you haven't thought this through, have you? So when we die, we just move into complete annihilation, and there's nothing left of us. Well, that's going to create some problems, isn't it? Let me continue on reading. So first of all, verse 25, he says, for when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. He said, you know what you've misunderstood? Life after death is not just a continuation of this broken, corrupt world. It isn't. It is not a continuation of the brokenness that you and I live in right now. That's what he means by saying, you just think that the life after death is just going to be a continuation of everything we've known in this life. He said, you are mistaken. It's kind of like when they said, the days of Noah, right before the flood hit, people were marrying and being given in marriage. What's the significance of that? They were just treating it like it was another day. They're just living. Listen, if you're marrying someone one day before the flood hits, you're preparing for a future, aren't you? You think life's going to go on just like it's always gone on. And so Jesus is saying, you guys are missing what's about to happen. This is going to be a completely new nature. It's not going to just be a continuation of the old. The old is broken and corrupt. But then he says this, verse 26, but regarding the fact that the dead rise again, have you not read the book of Moses? See, he hits him right with it. He says, I know what you think is authoritative. Let's talk about the book of Moses. Why don't we do that? So even there, where they're supposed to be strongest, it's just, don't you think it's wonderful how Jesus just attacks them at their strongest point? Not their weakest point. Let's just go right to the strongest point, the thing you love, the books of Moses, and show how you are clueless. He says, the book of Moses, in the passage about the burning bush, how God spoke to him, that's Moses, spoke to Moses saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the living. It's not I was the God of Abraham. I am the God of Abraham. Now, they haven't thought this through, because they're standing on the promises given to Abraham by God. And if Abraham no longer exists, there are no agreements to enforce. I mean, if I enter into a contract with someone and then I die, they can't come and go to my son and say, now you have to do it. This would completely obliterate the contract. Not that it's a covenant, it's not purely contractual, but there's no one to enforce it to. He said, you haven't thought this through, what you are saying. They don't understand Scripture. They just don't. And you know what's sad about that? Everyone thinks they do. It pains my heart like nothing else. If you know what keeps most pastors up at night praying for their congregation, it's this: that after you leave here today, I know for the next 7 days you can find teaching everywhere. And a lot of it is from very popular celebrity pastors who, quite frankly, do not know what they are doing. They just don't. And the thinking is, if you're someone like a Joel Osteen with 15,000 members in your church, and you're selling millions and millions of dollars of books, you must know what's going on, right? You must. And they're absolutely clueless. How bad has the situation become? Well, I'm going to close with this. I found a Sunday school final examination from 1927. And you know what? I'm going to give you the first four questions from this Sunday school. So this was given to third graders in 1927. So let's see how many you get right. And we chuckle, because we know where this is going, don't we? But I want to suggest to you, and I think many of you would agree with me, there's nothing funny about this. That the temple of God has reached a point in 2024 where these are simple what questions. These are not they're third graders. These are not difficult questions about the why and application questions and more difficult questions about how things are tied together. These are just simple what questions. I wonder how we would do this morning if we gave this test to every person sitting in a church in America today. I wonder what the average score would be. So here are the questions. Number one. I'll give you the answers in a minute, but you just jot down in the corner what you think the answer is. How many books are in the Old Testament? That's what they asked a bunch of third graders. And by the way, this was the final exam to get to the next level after this was at the end of the year, and this was to allow you to go on. This was like a graduation test. If you couldn't answer this, you couldn't graduate, and you would be stuck in the third grade next year. How many books in the New Testament? Now, the easier question is, how many books are in the Bible? I would imagine a lot of people would say 66. How many books are in the Old Testament? 39. How many in the New Testament? 27. I hope you got that right. Who wrote 1 Thessalonians? Who wrote 1 Thessalonians? Yeah, it's easy when it's like Matthew, Mark, and John, right? Luke and John. Who wrote 1 John? Yeah. Who Who wrote 1 Thessalonians? And of course, the answer is the Apostle Paul. Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, the answer is it's the Apostle Paul, and the reason we say that is because, of course, he is the instrument of the Holy Spirit writing that. And finally, this question: in what chapters in the Bible can you find the Beatitudes? There are two of them. In what chapters of the Bible can you find the Beatitudes? Maybe the easier one is Matthew chapter 5. Certainly it's the more complete copy of the Beatitudes, but you will also find them in Luke chapter 6. Oh, I see one smiling face. They got it. That's good. These are just simple what questions. You cannot be the temple of Christ if you don't know how to handle rightly the scriptures of God. You can't. And they have failed miserably, and he's about to take their lampstand away. I would suggest to you that today is the day of repentance with regard to these matters for the Church of Jesus Christ, especially in the United States, but really probably all throughout the West. Our Christian brothers and sisters in other parts of the world are probably putting us to shame in this regard. These are tough questions, and we need to be asking ourselves, does the authority of Jesus Christ reign in our fellowship? Is the pursuit of a deeper, more meaningful relationship with God the thing that animates us? Are we rendering a service unto God to those ends? And can we handle Scripture rightly? Or is it just something we're just too busy to give time to? You know, there are churches all over that are failing miserably in all these categories, and they need to repent. Some of them are so bad now, not only are they not pointing the way to atonement for sin, they deny that sin even exists. Andy Stanley in Atlanta arguing that the Ten Commandments are no longer even applicable to Christians. And if they're not denying that sin exists, they're making excuses for sin. We want you to have a high self-esteem. We don't want you to feel badly about yourself. The peer pressure of all these social groups to just deny that sin even exists or that we need to repent. And what's making it worse upon worse is that a lot of smaller churches are just trying to copy the mega churches, thinking, well, that's the success. They must have the key to success. They're clueless. You know, today's the day of repentance on these matters, both individually and sometimes collectively. It would be arrogant beyond all measure to think that God would not come and take away our lampstand. That's just arrogance. There is no continuous success. I don't care how godly your great-grandmother was. I don't care how godly your grandmother or grandfather was. I do not care how godly your parents were. The question is here today, on November 17th, 2024, how godly are you? And so we need to be praying to that end. I wish I could say we were done. 3 more conflicts that are going to reveal 3 more weaknesses in the temple. It's a wonder God did not call down fire from heaven right that moment to destroy the temple. Let's thank him for his graciousness that he did not, and that he has not done that to us. Let's pray to that end. Well, Lord, we don't want the words that we love you to be empty. We don't want to sing songs about how you are our vision, and they're just empty platitudes. We don't want to sing hymns about blessed be the name when really we're doing nothing to bless your name. We don't want to be that people. Self-examination is good. It grows us in love for you and love for one another. And I pray that you would grant to us a discerning eye, that you would grant to us a discerning ear, and that we would then use those gifts to your glory. Forgive us when we are distracted and we find ourselves mired in the minutia of arguments about taxes and other minutia, and the things that are important, like the atonement of sin, go neglected, and a right relationship with you goes uncherished and is not nourished. Forgive us if we have not developed the skill to rightly handle Scripture. But we know that you are gracious, and you are loving, and you are kind, and you are patient. So today is the day. Today's the day to repent and to chase after you with all of our heart and to be the people that you need us to be and are shaping us to be. And we ask this very humbly in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let's